Salve a tutti, sono Almarok e benvenuti in un nuovo video. Oggi siamo qui per fare un'intervista a Ghul, noto per essere chitarrista dei Mayhem e dei Kovenant. Prima di iniziare, vi ringrazio per la sua disponibilità, per aver accettato di essere qui oggi. Vi lascio l'intervista, vi auguro buona visione. Nice to meet you, thank you for staying today.
Yeah, I'm glad we can make it happen. As you know, I'm pretty busy at the moment, so this was just a piece of good luck, really, that we had this little time slot.
No problem, and thank you. Why you started to do music, why you started to do metal music. Let's talk about the beginning of your career and your influences.
What drew me into music in the first place was really film music, mainly John Williams, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, all of those like classic soundtracks. I think I was aware of, but not really able to articulate back then, was how important and how powerful the music was in the emotion of the excitement and the thrill of that I was feeling as a kid watching these things, how important the music was to enhancing that experience. So that's kind of why I fell in love with the idea of music and the art of music. And then later I got into metal through the same kind of desire. I just really liked, I found some sort of affinity with the atmosphere and the storytelling aspect that a lot of metal has, especially extreme metal. So at the time I was trying to kind of learn keyboards or like piano. But then I just thought guitar looked so much cooler. So I started to try to do that. And whereas for me, piano or keyboard instruments make a lot of sense because you can just kind of see all the music in front of you, the keys and the technique and everything is just right there. Guitar really didn't come naturally at all. But I work, I had to work extremely hard to just to be able to get my fingers into position. And it's not an easy instrument really, especially in the early stages. So yeah, and I just persevered with that, and that was where the path started for me.
And now let's talk about your complete story with Mayhem. Your introduction in the Hall of Fame in 2021 and the tour for celebrating the 40th anniversary of the band.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean it's been quite a wild ride, really. I've been with Mayhem now for very close to 15 years, which is a long time. I had previously met Attila and Hellhammer on the road when I was with Cradle of Filth, and then we talked actually many years before about the possibility of me coming to play with them. I think it was around 2007, 2000. No, it must have been 2008 was when we first began talking about the idea. But then it didn't happen then. But then the timing kind of came together a few years later. A lot has happened in that time. Like you said, we had the Hall of Fame thing, which was a pretty amazing thing to be part of. The 40-year anniversary shows that the tour we just finished actually a few months ago. That was incredible because we really upped the production. The thing with that tour for us was that we wanted to do something big. We wanted to do something on a larger scale, but with a band like Mayhem, you always have to be conscious. You can't commercialize it too much. It still has to have some aspect of raw energy to it. Otherwise, it becomes not really what it is. It becomes something else. So it was about finding a balance really between having like the big screens telling a story. It was a really cool tour and it was a really cool show. We worked from the most recent album, which at the time was Demon, and we went all the way back through the catalogue and then ended on the Death Crush stuff. And sometimes we had guests from the eras as well, to come join us. But that was great. And then as soon as we finished with that, of course, now we start the tour for the new album.
Recently, you have published a new album with Mayhem, Liturgy of the Dead. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, all right. So the composition process is always kind of the same now. We have a system that kind of works. I mean, we could do it better. The problem is it's very difficult for us to all get together. Once we're in the room together, for some reason, nothing happens. We just kind of, so what we tend to do now is that we will come up with the ideas separately at home, try to build something that feels like a song structure, and then get together. And once we have something like that, then it becomes much more of a workflow. And then Hellhammer has always got very clear ideas about structure. He knows basically what will work and what won't work. for Mayhem. So he's very good at that. And once you get him into the process, then it starts to feel, like real songwriting. But the concept and the idea for this album was really with the previous album with Demon, the idea was to explore the concept of demons, like not in a cliched way, but in a multi-level way. So it could be personal demons, it could be literal demons, it could, And with this album, the idea was to explore the concept of death, which is of course in metal is like basically the most cliched, most obvious thing that you can approach. We went into it deliberately saying like, okay, well, this has been done 1,000 times or more like 1,000,000 times by various bands to talk about death as a thing. So we wanted to explore it a bit in a kind of philosophical way and not necessarily in a directly literal way, but just as a general exploration of the concept of death in all of its kind of manifestations. So that was really where we were, and we knew that pretty much at the beginning. So all of the writing went with this in mind in the background. It wasn't like we just wrote a bunch of songs, came together, and said, "Okay, what lyrics should go here?" It was really we knew the overarching theme of what the feel should be, which is why the album feels. I think it feels very much like a concept album. It feels like one continuous flow of music rather than, I think with Demon, it was more defined songs. This album feels a bit more like a kind of stream of consciousness.
Recently, you joined in Kovenant, so let's talk about your actual project with Kovenant and
Mhm.
the Covenant project for this 2026.
We're playing in Finland tonight. That's been fantastic. I think it's been a year almost exactly now that I've been working with them. And we have some stuff lined up in the next months. It's been a very different experience, from Mayhem. It's a very different kind of music. The Nexus Polaris album, which has been the kind of the center point of these shows, is a very technically complicated album, and it's extremely difficult to play. Actually, very very technically demanding. So that's been really good for me. It's been really good to be doing a completely different sound and a completely different way of playing. It's always good to do that as a musician. If you get locked into a particular way of playing, not necessarily a bad thing, but for me, I like to be constantly tested and challenged. And this doing the Covenant stuff was definitely that. It's been very challenging, but it's been very successful, and the response has been pretty much overwhelmingly positive. And I'm just having a really good time doing it, which I think in a way is kind of the point.
And Covenant having program a new album in the future.
Yeah, I can't say too much, but there's definitely, I mean, people have been asking for a new Kovenant album for 20 years or something now. Um, yeah, there's stuff going on, let's put it that way. I don't know how much I should or even can say at this point, but it's definitely on the list of things to do, put it that way.
You have collaborated with Shining. Let's talk about this collaboration.
I've done quite a few shows with them over the years because what happened was Peter was unable to do some shows at some point, and Nicholas just asked me, "Would you be able to do this?" And again, completely different style of playing. Peter's a phenomenal guitar player, so that was also extremely challenging to step in there. And then I had to swap to the other side of the stage because then Peter came back, so I had to learn the other guitar part because that was also the person who had been doing it was unavailable. But it's been an off and on thing. Of course, we also did the album together with Nick Barker, and that was also extremely cool to work in Andy LaRocque's studio. And to work with him was amazing because I've been a fan of his playing for a long, long time. So it's been, I mean, there's not been much going on for a long time. I actually haven't spoken to Nicholas for a while. We always seem to miss each other somehow. But yeah, that was a really cool experience, and again, a totally different thing. A extremely wildly different way of playing, and a totally different approach on the instrument. So it was challenging. It was scary. The first show was really scary because it came up with very short notice, and it was a lot of stuff to learn. It was very interesting. Nicholas is an extremely interesting guy to work with. We get along well. So, of course, he's well known for being quite, how to say it, a complicated individual. But he's always been cool with me, and yeah, we I think we had well, I certainly had a really good time doing those shows.
In the past, we've collaborated with Cradle of Filth too at the
Mhm.
album Pornography. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, I mean that was my break in the industry really. I started with them in 2005 or the end of four. I think it was the beginning of 2005. And I was there for about 5 years. And yeah, I mean that's kind of where I learned the job, you know. I learned the trade, I learned about touring, I learned about being on stage for real, not just like a local pub or something, but like a big stage with a lot of people, festivals and so on. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire. You know, most people have a build up. They'll play local places and then a bit bigger and a bit bigger, and you know, do a van tour and then do a bus tour and stuff. And I went straight into the big end of that, which was in a way really good, but also in a way very scary. And I think I made a lot of mistakes in those days, you know, personal and professional, because I mean, at that age, I was what, 24. I was I was an idiot, you know. I mean, some people would say I still am, but at least I've learned something along the way, you know. And in those days, I really didn't know anything. And I think being dumped into that environment with just here you go, right now you're on tour with like a major band. Uh, yeah, it was a pretty strange time, of course.
What about your individual music project? Let's talk about this.
Yeah, I've always got something going on. I like to be busy, you know. If we're not doing something directly related to one of the active bands, I just tend to just do stuff, you know, because I like to write music. I have a synth project, R Complex, which is just like what I do when it's like a hobby, you know. I love doing it. It's nothing to do with, I don't use guitars at all. It's nothing to do with metal, really. It's just a way for me to explore a completely different way of composing. Planning to do something with that in the next few months because we'll have a break, I think, of about 4 or 5 months with both bands where there won't be any touring. So I have that. I also put out a solo album, a guitar album that I recorded a long time ago and that just got properly mixed and released. That kind of went under the radar. I didn't really want to promote it. It was really I just put it out because it had been there for so long. But I'm pretty proud of it. It's called Scratches. If you're into sort of technical guitar playing, I think there's some cool stuff in there for you. Um, so yeah, I have that. And I'm also doing some stuff with a guy called Zardonic, which is a drum and bass DJ. We've just done a track together, a kind of crossover black metal drum and bass thing, which has come out extremely cool. And I'm hoping that we can do some more in the future, actually, because it's quite an interesting area to explore. I suppose you could say I'm kind of addicted to working when I don't have music to write or I don't have something to learn or do. I get very, very agitated. So I just fill my time with stuff. And I think overall it's quite a good thing because the more you do, the more you learn, the better you become, the more ideas that flow. Sometimes I could be writing something for one project that ends up being better in another project, or I can come up with a synth idea that actually sounds super cool on guitar and end up using it as a riff in Mayhem. You know, it's a sort of never-ending creative output, which is almost like a compulsion, I guess.
If you want to be remembered for an album in your career, an album you're particularly proud, which is and why, or more than one.
Everything I do, really, I'm proud of. But I guess, I mean, I really have a soft spot for the Demon album. I just really enjoyed playing those songs live, and it was a really cool process getting that done. So I suppose that would be in one of my top proud moments in terms of releases that I've been a part of. But genuinely, everything I do, everything I put my name to is I'm proud of it because I think it's really important to remind yourself that it's such a privilege to even do this, you know, to even have the opportunity to record and for people to actually listen to it and to pay money to come and listen to it. You know, I think Demon just stands out to me somehow. I think that just the whole time period and the way how successful the tours were and the response and everything. I think, yeah, I guess I would say that.
How you define black metal and how the music you play concern with your life philosophy.
It's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't define black metal. I think that definitions is just something for the journalists to do. You know, it's not. I think if you start thinking like that as a musician, you become in danger of just slotting yourself into a category and then becoming scared to ever step out of that category. And black metal fans especially are very, very, very strict about what every single one has a very, very personal, specific set of rules that you're supposed to slot into, which is, whatever, that's fair enough. I personally don't think like that. But I do think that there are certain things that black metal has that has to be there. And one of the main things is a kind of, people call it an atmosphere, but I think I would call it more like an aura. It creates a certain sense in the space of where you are when it's played. It creates a kind of, I guess you could call it a negative feeling, but not really negative, more just dark. And it sort of almost opens a portal to a kind of, I don't know, like a very, very dark, sinister dimension. And the way I look at it and the way and how it's been important to me is it's like a window into the dark parts of your mind, the ugly parts of your mind, the scary parts of your mind. And I suppose it's a way of turning that into something tangible so that you can almost cope with it better. I think that there's been studies done showing that people that listen to angry, negative music tend to be actually overall have better mental health. And I think there's a reason for that because it's like a coping mechanism. It's a way for you to explore these like I said, these ugly parts of existence and somehow engage with them, and almost it's almost like a therapy. I wouldn't necessarily call it a personal life philosophy, but just my sense of how I experience it is exactly that. It's like a way to engage with the scary, difficult parts of life, especially on a spiritual level. I think most black metal has a spiritual element to it, and it doesn't have to be a specific religious spirituality, but it's a kind of. I think that it creates a sense, like I said, that you're almost in touch with another space, another dimension. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm not making any sense, but I know what I mean.
Your project and your band's project for this 2026 and for 2027?
That's an interesting question because between 20 at the end of summer, there's going to be a few more shows, I think, in going into autumn, and then it's going to be 5 months of pretty much just downtime in my studio. So far, across these years, these 2 years, it's been relatively quiet compared to previous years. But what I'm thinking is that my overall project for that time will basically just be to go into the studio, sit down every day and just see what happens, which is actually a really exciting thing to think about. I don't know what it's going to be. I might write some Mayhem tracks. I might write. I just don't know. And that to me is something I haven't had for many years, and I'm actually really excited about it. I mean, there's a good chance also I come out at the end of the 5 months with absolutely nothing of any worth, but it's still. I think that really the main project for me in that time is just to rediscover a kind of free creativity and just, yeah, like I said, just see what happens, which is a really cool thing to be able to do as a musician.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for staying today. Good luck
Of
for all.
course.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.